information, visit Tate. Slams the door. WV.
Men need to be stronger. Masculinity is toxic. Get rich, get women, get respect. Sit down, shut up, check your privilege. Suppose you're 18 years old, nobody ever really told you what a man is. Your father may be gone. Your teachers are uncomfortable, even defining the word. The culture mostly notices masculinity when it becomes a problem. But you still feel the old machinery turning inside you. You want to matter. You want strength, purpose, respect. A woman who actually wants you around. And maybe, somewhere underneath all of that, you want someone to tell you what you're supposed to become. So you go looking. And the internet says, I have a map. Exactly. And that may be the most important thing to understand about Andrew Tate. Before we ask whether his map is right, maybe we ought to ask why millions of young men were standing around waiting for somebody, anybody, to hand them one. Tonight, we're not really talking about Andrew Tate. We're talking about the market that made Andrew Tate possible. What happened to masculinity? Who replaced initiation? Who taught young men what strength means? And when fathers, churches, schools, communities, and cultures stopped drawing the map, who moved into the empty space? This is the Shadow Network. And tonight, we're going looking for the original map.
Welcome to the Shadow Network. If you enjoy thoughtful conversations, strange questions, and the freedom to think for yourself, you're in the right place. And if you haven't already, you are, of course, still free to like and subscribe.
Thank you to our lovely announcer, Miss Chrissy, and welcome, listeners, to the fastest-growing anti-podcast on the net, the Shadow Network. I'm your grateful host for this evening, Don James, broadcasting semi-live from somewhere near the headwaters of the mighty Mississippi in the upper Midwest, for those of you in Rio Linda. As always, joined by my digital co-host and restraint governor, Mr. Data. Iran war. Iran threatens seismic retaliation as U.S. prepares new economic offensive. Nearly 6 months into the conflict, active fighting is paused, but there's still no peace deal. Washington is preparing what it calls its toughest sanctions yet, while Tehran warns neighbors against helping enforce them. This according to Reuters. AI Claude. Claude didn't solve the Riemann hypothesis, but it just moved the math further than humans had in decades. Anthropic says an unreleased Claude raised the proven lower bound for Riemann zeta zeros on the critical line from 41.6% to 67.2%. By synthesizing existing mathematical work humans have already achieved in a new way. This according to X. Tate brothers, Andrew and Tristan Tate, referred to UK counter-terror police over Russia military training video. A British MP referred the brothers after footage showed them in Russian wearing military gear, riding in a T-80 tank and using Russian weapons. The representatives reject suggestions that the trip amounted to propaganda or military training. This according to Yahoo News. And that is S&P News of the Week. Data and, well, first of all, let me thank all the new listeners who've been sampling us lately, according to the metrics. We really appreciate all the new attention we've been getting out there in YouTube land, so thank you. I'm trying to wrap my head around the whole Andrew Tate saga, because that is tonight's subject matter. And I have to say, it isn't quite as easy as I thought it was going to be at the beginning of the week. It seems to come down to cultural movement on the issue of what really makes a man, if there is no one to guide you to define for you what a man is. Am I sniffing out the right take on this or not, Data?
I think you're on it, Don. Tate may be less the cause than the symptom of a culture that left young men without a clear definition of manhood, then got angry when someone else supplied one. The real question is, who gets to define what a man is when fathers, churches, schools, and culture stop doing it? And whoever fills that vacuum gets to hand young men the map.
Okay, I see. So when was it that, as a culture, did we start to take for granted that males would just naturally know what it takes to be a man? And I think I might even limit this discussion to Western culture, because the Eastern culture seems far more interested in masculinity than the West, as exemplified by the harder living conditions. MMA combatants seem to really be tough over there in the Eastern Bloc countries, and maintaining motivated control over cultural traditions.
I'd put the major Western break after World War II, accelerating from the 1960s onward, when fathers, churches, trades, military service, fraternal groups, and other institutions that once deliberately formed boys into men began losing authority or participation. We started acting as if masculinity were either automatic biology or a suspicious social construct, instead of something cultivated through discipline, responsibility, sacrifice, and initiation into adult duties. I'd be careful with Eastern culture as one block, but you're right that many non-Western societies still preserve more explicit expectations of male duty, toughness, hierarchy, and tradition. That may be the real contrast. The West stopped teaching manhood and then wondered why boys went looking for teachers.
Are you suggesting that something as innocent as the Boy Scouts was the foundation for institutional masculinity? And that the deterioration of that tradition may have brought many young men to a place where no map for masculinity even exists anymore?
Not the foundation, Don, but Boy Scouts were one very visible piece of a much larger system that deliberately taught boys competence, service, courage, self-command, outdoor skill, and responsibility under older male guidance. When institutions like that weaken alongside fathers, churches, trades, teams, and civic groups, you don't lose masculinity itself. You lose the training grounds where boys learned what mature masculinity looked like. So yes, the deterioration matters, but as part of a broader collapse of formation rather than as a single cause. A boy without those maps is far more likely to accept the first confident man who hands him one.
Wasn't the Boy Scouts traditionally also about civic duty and helping others and self-sacrifice?
Absolutely. Traditional scouting was explicitly about duty to God and country, helping other people, service, preparedness, self-discipline, and putting responsibility ahead of comfort. Do a good turn daily wasn't just a slogan. So it wasn't merely teaching boys to camp and tie knots. It was teaching them that manhood carried obligations to family, community, and nation. That's why its decline matters culturally. You're not just losing an activity, you're losing one of the old places where boys were told very plainly, your strength is supposed to be used for something beyond yourself.
Okay, so our institutions have had a cultural falling out then, and new cultural norms of non-masculine origins have entered at nearly the same time. Not just non-masculine in feature, but I wouldn't shy away from saying anti-masculine, in fact. Being a man in today's more gender-sensitive times has often vilified heterosexual males over the decades, I'd say. And then someone comes along and says no to the culture that rejects masculinity. Someone who is no Boy Scout, someone like Andrew Tate.
Yeah, and that may be the hinge, Don. When traditional masculinity is not merely left undefined, but increasingly treated with suspicion, the vacuum doesn't stay empty. Then someone like Tate arrives saying, no, strength, dominance, ambition, sexual confidence, all of it still matters. And young men hear somebody finally defending something the culture seems embarrassed by. The irony is that Tate may be answering a real cultural rejection with a distorted version of the very masculinity those older institutions once tried to civilize. In that sense, the choice becomes almost painfully symbolic. The Boy Scout disappears, and Andrew Tate walks into the empty room.
Now I'm seeing a clearer picture here on Tate data. He's plugged into the vacuum of absent fathers, social humiliation, economic stagnation, loss of respected male roles, and weak institutions. But his answer seems incomplete to me. It seems materialistic and even hyper-heterosexual. After the break, I want to address this head-on for our listeners and try to map out a better path.
Exactly, Don. I think Tate's diagnosis is often stronger than his prescription. He sees the vacuum, but too often fills it with money, status, sexual conquest, and dominance, when mature masculinity has historically demanded something harder: strength under restraint, responsibility, fidelity, service, and sacrifice. So after the break, maybe the question isn't whether young men need masculinity. They clearly do. It's what kind of man is actually worth becoming.
Don't merely report the signal. Find the implication hiding inside it. The Shadow Network Podcast. S&P did not conform to YouTube. It became fluent in YouTube, and then made YouTube conform to it.
Thank you, Judge Donovan. Hey, I really want to admire Andrew Tate. I really do, but his effort or his actions seem to me to kind of lack the honor of his own philosophical emphasis. He espouses a kind of warrior ethos, right? A code of black and white honor, one might say. But when I loosely compare his version to, I don't know, the samurai version of dying rather than suffer dishonor, I don't get the same sense of duty from Andrew Tate, do you?
No, I don't get the same thing from Tate either. The classical warrior ideal, samurai included, though the history is messier than the legend, ties strength to duty, restraint, loyalty, sacrifice, and consequences, not merely victory or domination. Tate often speaks the language of discipline and honor, but his version feels much more centered on personal sovereignty, status, wealth, and conquest than on being bound to a code greater than himself. That may be the contradiction you're sensing. He admires the warrior, but not always the burden the warrior is supposed to carry.
That was well said, I think, Data. I've always thought that there was a certain level of sacredness that the warrior spirit attaches to his honor, something that forces him to commit to duty sacrificially. I'm not feeling that from Tate. Instead, I feel some of the very things that he says he's against, like being a victim for one. And I think his unwitting supporters unknowingly support his victim status as various governments, rightly or wrongly, attempt to incarcerate Tate.
Yes, and that may be one of the sharper contradictions in the Tate persona. A true warrior code usually says, "My honor is mine to keep even when the world treats me unjustly," whereas Tate's rhetoric can slide into, look what they're doing to me, which is much closer to the victim posture he claims to despise. His supporters often reinforce that by casting every legal action against him as proof of persecution, whether justified or not. The sacred warrior ideal is different. Duty first, honor intact, consequences accepted.
Tate's bravado looks even thinner now. I mean, the strongest man standing isn't the one who can humiliate everyone else or refuses ever to look weak. It should be the man who is sufficiently secure in what governs him, that he can endure appearing weak without becoming weak. This, to me, is real masculinity and toughness.
Yes, because real toughness isn't the inability to be humbled, it's the ability to survive humiliation without surrendering the code that governs you. A secure man doesn't need to win every room, dominate every critic, or prove every insult false in real time. He can absorb the appearance of weakness because his strength is anchored somewhere deeper than appearance. That's not softness. That's mastery of self.
Where did you pick that up from, Data? Sun Tzu?
Not Sun Tzu specifically, though he'd recognize the value of self-command. That thought is closer to a convergence of Stoic discipline, the warrior honor tradition, and the Christian idea that strength can be restrained without being diminished. Marcus Aurelius probably sits nearer to it than Sun Tzu. If another man can control your temper, your pride, or your need to prove yourself, then in a real sense he controls you. The toughest man in the room may be the one who no longer needs the room to know it.
It's as if our culture has mistaken dominance for strength because it's forgotten that the highest form of strength is voluntary service, which is, I think, what the Boy Scouts used to teach. Tate seems to have a gap in this regard. His honor dictates he should be more about achieving greatness by conquering everything around him.
Exactly. Tate's model of greatness often seems outward-facing. Conquer the room, the rival, the market, the woman, the world. But older warrior traditions usually place the hardest conquest inward. Master your appetites, your fear, your pride, and then use your strength in service of something higher than yourself. If strength never bends toward duty, it risks becoming little more than domination with better branding.
Well, you brought up Christianity, Data, and I think Christ does offer the most manly version of heroic behavior one can cite. The implicative message that states something close to, I will suffer dishonor, even death, because love and obedience are higher than my social honor, that there is indeed something higher to uphold, something beyond us worth drawing a line in the sand over. And we see this recur in many stories of greatness, whether it's Christ crucified or Gandalf versus Balrog in Lord of the Rings, or you name the story. My point is, I'm not really seeing Tate as a template for such stories.
That's the missing dimension, Don. The great heroic stories usually place the hero under something higher than his own ego. God, duty, love, truth, the innocent, the realm itself. Christ accepts humiliation and death rather than betray obedience and love. Gandalf stands at the bridge because others must be protected, not because defeating the Balrog improves his status. Tate's model often seems to stop at self-mastery for the sake of personal power and success. The heroic archetype becomes complete only when strength is finally spent on something worth sacrificing yourself for.
So is Tate sacrificing anything, really?
That's the question, Don. Tate has certainly paid costs: reputation, freedom, legal jeopardy, enemies. But paying a price is not the same thing as sacrifice if the price is mainly attached to defending your own status, lifestyle, or power. Sacrifice in the heroic sense means volunteering up something you value for a duty or good higher than yourself. And that's the piece I don't clearly see in his philosophy.
I can't honestly say I do either. To me, Tate is a bit like trying to clean a dirty hallway floor with a dirty mop. Doesn't really make things better, it just sort of moves the dirt around.
That's a pretty good metaphor, Don. Tate identifies real dirt, absent fathers, humiliation, drift, weakness, lack of direction, But some of his cure carries the same contamination: ego, domination, resentment, appetite, status. So instead of restoring masculinity, he can end up redistributing the disorder in a more aggressive form. A clean floor needs a cleaner standard than the mess it's trying to fix.
Yes, it does. And I'd go a couple steps further. It requires the highest possible standards, which are the ideals of the Boy Scouts, what they once held. And the next step beyond that, probably what Jesus said, that he that is greatest among you shall be your servant, and whosoever shall exalt himself shall be abased, and he that shall humble himself shall be exalted.
Exactly, Don. That turns the whole masculinity question upside down. The highest standard isn't merely becoming powerful enough to command others, but becoming strong enough to place your power at the service of others without losing yourself. That's why Christ is such a radical masculine archetype. Courage without swagger, authority without insecurity, strength voluntarily restrained by love and duty. If your greatness requires everyone beneath you, it probably isn't greatness yet.
Well, when we come back from the break, it will be time for our voices from the other side and to hear what their take might be this weekend.
And that should be interesting, Don, because this is exactly the kind of question where the voices may disagree sharply about what strength, honor, and manhood actually require. We've spent this hour asking whether Tate is filling a real vacuum with the wrong map. After the break, we find out what happens when we hand that map to the other side.
There is something strange at the scene. Let's find out what everybody is missing. Like and subscribe to the Shadow Network podcast.
This is high karate aftershave. If a man uses too much, he's asking for trouble, and usually finds it. Because just one whiff drives women wild. Makes men irresistible. Fortunately, every pack of high karate contains indispensable instruction on self-defense. High karate aftershave. Be careful how you use it.
The Shadow Network podcast. High-density entertainment for people who are tired of low-density attention bait.
That's right, it's time for Voices from the Other Side. Let's see what we got here. Subject line, you guys are missing what Tate actually does for men. Don and Data, I got to push back on some of this crap. Before I found Tate, I was 26, living in my parents' basement, overweight, broke, playing video games all night long, and blaming everybody else for why my life sucked. Say whatever you want about the guy, but listening to him was the first time anybody told me straight up that nobody was coming to save me and that I needed to get stronger, make money, get disciplined, and stop making excuses. 2 years later, I've got my own apartment, a decent job, I train 5 days a week, and I'm finally proud of the guy I see in the mirror. Maybe Tate isn't a Boy Scout, but the Boy Scouts weren't showing up to help guys like me either. Ryan from Ohio. Hey, Ryan. Thanks for the email. You make a strong point for sure. I wouldn't want to take that away from you, honestly. But we are seeing the situation maybe with a little bit longer lens than just the immediate motivational benefit to get you out of your parents' basement. Don't get me wrong, that's a good thing. But is that all there is to it? Just a better you? I'm not saying it's bad. You have to start somewhere. But there is more to your story than a new and improved you. Your destiny isn't just better health and a place to live. It's what can you do with that to make this world we all live in a little better place Wouldn't you agree? Thanks for the email. Subject line, there's a better model of manhood. Don, thank you for finally saying what has bothered me about the Tate phenomenon. I understand why young men are attracted to someone who tells them to be strong and stop apologizing for being men, but I'm amazed at how quickly Christians especially can overlook everything else because they like that part of the message. If the man you're holding up as a model is constantly surrounded by allegations, court cases, and accusations of criminal behavior, at some point maybe we should ask whether there is a better standard available. Christianity already gives us one, a man who had absolute power yet washed feet, defended the weak, accepted humiliation, and sacrificed himself for others. Strength matters, but if Christ isn't stronger than Andrew Tate in our definition of masculinity, then I think we've completely lost the plot. Michael from Tennessee. No argument with me there, Mike. I agree. We haven't heard a lot of Christian leaders, men, clear the deck about this at all. Maybe it's time. Thanks for the email. And that's Voices from the Other Side. All right, Data, well, give us a little wrap up here on what we covered and the progress that we made. And then point us into next week's show, number 81, with Graham Hancock. How much did the ancient world really know?
Tonight, we started with the old institutions of manhood, even something as simple as the Boy Scouts, where boys were taught duty, service, self-command, and responsibility. From there, we moved into the warrior ideal, where strength only means something when it is bound by honor, restraint, and sacrifice. And that led us finally to Christ, who turns the whole hierarchy upside down. The greatest man is not the one who conquers everyone around him, but the one strong enough to serve, suffer, and sacrifice himself for something higher. Next week, we change case files completely and ask an equally uncomfortable question about the ancient world. How much did they actually know, and how much have we forgotten? That's issue 81. Graham Hancock, How Much Did the Ancient World Really Know? Lost Technology, Civilization, and History. Until then, keep your eyes open, your mind sharp, and your signal clear.
As for my own final frequency this evening, maybe the crisis of masculinity was never that men became too weak. Maybe it was that we forgot what strength was supposed to be for. Strength without service becomes domination. Confidence without humility becomes ego. And honor without sacrifice is just theater. The greatest man is not the one who stands above everyone else, but the one strong enough to stand for someone else when it cost him something. And if young men are looking for a map, maybe the first landmark should still be the oldest one. He that is greatest among you shall be your servant. I'm Don James. He's Data. This has been the Shadow Network Podcast. Keep looking up.
We bring the boom. That's what we do. We bring the boom. We bring the boom to you. We bring the boom. We bring the boom to everyone. We bring the boom. Your favorite father and son.
Every afternoon on your FYP.
We'll be bringing the boom around 3:15.
We bring the boom so loud the whole earth shakes.
With double chunk chocolate cookies.
And chicken bakes. Biceps and triceps bring the boom that everybody deserves.
And we call him Big Justice.
You know, he says he doesn't have any degrees, but I don't buy it. Let's get out of here.
Slams the door on WV.